من
I now give
مختلف
the floor to Dr.
المشاركين.
Beredashti, the
الآن
Executive Secretary at ESCWA.
أعطي
Dr. Dashti,
المجال
the floor is yours.
للمدير التنفيذي في المنظمة.
Thank you, Hania.
شكرا
Good
لك
morning and good
صباح
afternoon,
الخير ومساء الخير.
and a warm welcome to the distinguished delegates,
وترحيب خاص
colleagues and friends joining us from around the globe.
ينضمون إلينا من مختلف أنحاء العالم.
It's my pleasure to open this side event organized with our dear friends and partners in the Office for South-South Cooperation.
في مكتب التعاون الجنوبي
The focus of this event is at the heart of the theme of the HLPF this year. It's also at the heart of key messages emanating from the Arab Forum for Sustainable Development 2021 and the fora of sister regional commissions. COVID-19, as you know, has been devastating, and the trend that emerged is familiar across the world. Those groups that were vulnerable before the pandemic suffered the worst as the COVID crisis hit. Social protection reform has been ongoing for a few years now, extending coverage and shifting from general subsidies to poverty-targeted cash transfers. But there's still a missing middle. Those in the informal sector, the young and unemployed, migrant workers, the elderly, they are not covered by existing schemes and are vulnerable to any shocks or crises. In the Arab region alone, around 85% of youth are estimated to work in the informal sector, outside any kind of social protection coverage. In Africa, about 86% of employment is informal. In Asia and the Pacific region, 70% of workers are trapped in informal jobs. In Latin America and the Caribbean, only 47% of the employed are affiliated with a pension system. The COVID-19 crisis made the invisible visible. States have an urgent responsibility to reform their social protection systems to address the needs of those who fall through the cracks. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 crisis is an opportunity for innovation and an opportunity for innovative solutions. Tomorrow, we will launch a one-of-a-kind COVID-19 stimulus tracker, an innovative global observatory aimed at assessing the equity and adequacy of social protection and economic policy responses in 194 countries. The tracker helps to inform peer learning about policy actions, strengthen policy-making capacity, and improve government readiness to formulate effective policy responses to future shocks. Analyzing COVID-19 responses in the tracker, we at ESCWA have estimated that developing countries around the world need an additional $5 trillion to recover from COVID-19 and catch up to the global average of fiscal support as share of GDP. The Arab region alone needs $462 billion. Fiscal space already limited and is shrinking, especially in developing countries, many of which are burdened by debt. So our question today is to the point: how can least developed countries and highly indebted developing countries address this surge of need while resources plunge? These countries not only need additional resources, but they also need additional ideas, new methodologies, and inspiring examples. As they move forward, countries also need technical support. This is where South-South cooperation comes in. At ESCWA, and in response to a call by our member states, we established the group of experts on social protection reforms. It is a technical committee and a mechanism for discussion among Arab ministries of social affairs with the aim of supporting work on social protections. We will also hear of success stories spearheaded by ESCAP and ECLAC. Our honorable guests Today will also represent rich of experience from Global South, will also share with us not only their efforts to support social protection reform, they will also share with us a vision for the way forward together. South-South cooperation is a framework rooted in solidarity, and solidarity has emerged as the guiding light out of the darkness of the COVID-19 crisis. No country, no state, no stakeholder group can recover alone. Cooperation, especially among countries of the South, is critical. I thank you all for being with us today. Your participation is part of our collective efforts to make the invisible visible, to learn from each other, and to recover better together. Thank you for having you with us.
Thank you, Dr. Rola Dashti. Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning. I have the role today to present the remarks of the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation. And after that, I will also be moderating the session today, which will include speakers, 4 speakers and 5 discussants. Let me start first, join Dr. Rola Dashti, Under Secretary General and Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia, to welcome you at this event. It is our great honor to co-organize this event at the 2021 High-Level Political Forum with ESCWA on South-South Cooperation for more inclusive and sustainable social protection systems in the COVID-19 recovery and achievement of the 2030 agenda. The focus of this event, as Dr. Rola Dashti mentioned, aligns closely with the major theme of HLPF this year, which is about sustainable and resilient recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic that promotes the economic, social, and environmental dimensions of sustainable development. Dr. Rola Dashti actually in her remarks has provided a comprehensive review on where do we stand on the challenges of COVID-19 and the response through the social protection, and also addressed the importance of South-South cooperation in this context. So my role actually is very simple now, is just to present 2 remarks that I would like to share it with you before we move to the speakers and discussants. Social protection, as you know, is critical to the achievement of sustainable development goals. It supports addressing inequalities and promote inclusive growth. An inclusive and sustainable social protection system is an important requirement and condition for several sustainable development goals: no poverty, zero hunger, decent work and economic growth, and reduced inequalities, particularly the decent work, creating employment, and social protection represent integral elements of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Before even the spread of the pandemic, according to the Committee for Development Policy, the most cited measure by countries in their voluntary national reviews to address leaving no one behind was social protection. In the context of COVID-19, effective social protection and social safety networks have become more crucial. The world is experiencing significant economic recession. According to the UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights, over 1,400 measures have been adopted since the start of the pandemic. And despite several financial constraints, many countries of the South have developed and implemented innovative and integrated approaches which have led to significant results. However, as the pandemic and its consequences are likely to continue, more efforts need to be made, as many countries have not put comprehensive national social protection systems in place, let alone financial resources. Effective and inclusive social protection system as a key pathway for reducing vulnerabilities and building resilience to shocks, reducing poverty and achieving the SDGs continues to be a demonstrated priority for the UN system entities, and several initiatives have already been implemented, and many are currently underway. Across regions, exchange of knowledge and experiences in social protection through South-South cooperation have also contributed towards these efforts by partner countries. We will hear about some of these today that could potentially be of interest for the strengthening of social protection systems and capacities in the Arab region, which has shown increasing support for South-South cooperation, but yet to tap in the full potential for it. We believe that South-South and triangular cooperation is pivotal for the region's long-term economic growth and achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. At the office, with the global and UN system-wide mandate, we are of the view that improved exchanges of experiences, know-how, and development solutions among countries and southern institutions, professionals, civil society, academia, and the private sector will have long-lasting development impact. This would also be in line with the UN system-wide strategy for South-South and triangular cooperation that the office coordinated last year at the request of the United Nations Secretary General. The United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation also has platforms for sharing knowledge and good practices, such as South-South Galaxy, a digital global knowledge sharing and partnership brokering platform. We would be interested in exploring possible follow-up opportunities to this meeting, as concerted actions can no doubt bring transformative changes in the lives of those in need. I wish you all fruitful deliberation. And now I will move to the moderating the session of today, which as I said, is featuring distinguished speakers representing governments and also regional commissions, think tanks, and the civil society. The four speakers, that we have today are distinguished ministers from Egypt and from Palestine, from Costa Rica, and also we are delighted also to have a representative from the Islamic Development Bank. I will start the discussion with Her Excellency Dr. Naveen El-Kabbaj, Minister of Social Solidarity in Egypt. Dr. Naveen El-Kabbaj is very well known, not only as a minister, but she also as a distinguished development practitioner for a long time. So in the last few years, Dr. Naveen, the government of Egypt, even before the pandemic, has embarked on transformative changes on the social and economic reform. You have been actually pioneering this effort in the ministry. We would like to hear from you. What has the government of Egypt actually, even before the pandemic, what were the main issues that the government has been embarking on, and also after the pandemic? And if you can tell us also whether it is part of your, of course, work seeking, good examples from other countries from the Global South. The floor of yours is yours, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to express my honor and gratitude and also pleasure to participate in such an important issue and very close to our hearts, whether the South-South cooperation or for the sustainable social protection. Our sincere regards for Mrs. Rola Dashti, the Executive Secretary at ESCWA, and also Mr. Abdel Latif, Director in charge for UNOSSC, and Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates. It's a pleasure to be with you and to learn from the other experiences in the other countries. And I'd like to start with sending our deep condolences and sincere feelings for all the families who lost members in COVID because of COVID-19, and best wishes for speedy recovery for those who were infected, and also send our appreciation and respect and recognition for all the health sector and the scientific and medical research people who spent many hours and days and months living in this circumstances and giving the best. So we really thank them from the bottom of our hearts, from Egypt and from all of the world. I'd like to shed the light on different issues. Number one, on the policy issues that Egypt has taken before even COVID-19 and during the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, the interventions were mainly focused on health, humanitarian, and emergency interventions. There were other interventions that were focused on economic issues and the economic repercussions of the intervention of the pandemic. And there were policy implications that were left with after the pandemic, because we learned a lot. In spite of all the hard days we lived, we learned a lot, and it made our eyes open for many policies that we should have taken, or maybe it's time to consider during the coming period. I think also we diversified our partnerships, and this is why South-South cooperation is becoming more and more imposed and not only selected, because we need each other really in many issues. And also the targeting issue became to be very important, because the demand is much bigger than the supply. And this is why the targeting and the sensitization to the most vulnerable groups is very important, especially when the resources are scarce. So the issue of the PMT for poverty, or the sensitization towards certain groups like the elderly and most vulnerable, the poorest women, children, especially people with disabilities, was also an important lesson to learn, all of us, because I think there was some issues raised on the people with disabilities and who to sacrifice with at the beginning, which goes against humanity. And this is why, I mean, the policy implications were also important. I think prior to COVID-19 crisis, Egypt undertook, starting from 2014, a strong reform program related to structural economic adjustment and social reforms and redistribution of subsidy that really made Egypt more resilient during the COVID-19. Yes, we spent many of the benefits that we have gained during these years, but at least it created a bottom of protection for the Egyptian economy. For the first time that Egypt, the poverty percentage has decreased from 32.5 to 29.7. And this is not only because of the policy decisions, but because also of the partnership with civil society, with religious institutions and zakat issues, especially among the different people, and the private sector intervention with special emphasis on the banking sector that provided all their best to make for the gap that took place during this time. So the kind of partnership and solidarity between the different groups was very strong. I think also the economic reform program has remarkably contributed to the resilience of Egypt's economy. Starting with the health, humanitarian and emergency sector, Egypt has took bold decisions to have around 411,000 households were added to the conditional cash transfer program, which represents around 20% increase in those who were covered with conditional cash transfers. Targeting was meant to reach females, to reach elderly people and people with disabilities, with around 54% targeting the elderly and the people with disabilities, and around 40-something% targeting females. Also, I think the contribution of the UN agencies, and we really thank them for their support during this time, whether WFP, UNICEF, ESCWA, FAO, I mean, many organizations provided support during this time in order to add additional vulnerable groups. Around more than 80,000 vulnerable groups were added for this emergency period only. It was not sustainable as cash transfer, but also in partnership with civil society organizations. Interventions varied between food packages, medication, sanitizers, services directed to hospitals and medical teams, services directed to local communities. We offered 20 million services, including food, medicine, and sterilization tools. Around 2.4 billion Egyptian pounds were spent by civil society during this pandemic, which proves that it is becoming more and more stronger than before. I think also there were a special attention given to the social care institutions, whether for children or people with disabilities or elderly. Minimal casualties took place in social care institutions. The Egyptian Red Crescent contributed a lot to doing the sterilization process, to providing all the medicine, and I think It was very flagrant and very clear, their interventions during this time to have social care institutions, train stations, government institutions. So it was really the health, humanitarian, and emergency. We got the 3 highest Guinness records for emergency supply during this time, and it was recorded for Egypt in Dubai at that time for having the biggest emergency supply. As for the economic interventions, I think to support these sectors, if we support the sectors that were mostly affected were SMEs, casual laborers and informal sector, tourism and industry, agriculture and aviation sectors. Also, those who returned back from the Arab countries and from other countries, like the remittances. So these are the most, actually all of the sectors were definitely affected, but those who were mostly affected were the SMEs, and that's why actually a corona tax of 1% have been introduced by a policy decision from the president, and the central bank had cut the interest rate by 3% in response to the pandemic. So I think this contributed a lot. It's not only this, it's also the tourism, and the government had also supported tourism industry, agriculture and aviation sectors through preferential interest rates on loans, reduction in energy cost, and provision of loans with longer grace period, and having collecting the social insurance contribution late and providing them with grace period in order to provide them with opportunity to regain themselves. Also, remittances represented around 10 to 10% of Egypt's GDP. However, the majority of Egyptians working overseas were returning back, which led to a wave of layoffs affecting large numbers of Egyptian expatriates, and the government is working on reintegrating the returnees into the Egyptian labor market. So the Egyptian labor market also now is currently being studied in order to reintroduce the structural changes that have taken place. Also, there was a disproportionate impact on livelihood of certain vulnerable groups, especially while considering the inequalities that exist structurally, including informal workers, female-headed households, orphans, and elderly. And this is why special attention were given to them. I think also the government has allocated emergency cash support to about 1.6 million informal workers at the total number of 4.6 billion. So actually the government also had a heavy burden to carry for the informal workers, but it was a lesson learned for us that we have to have a strategy for informal workers and to establish an emergency fund for these circumstances. It was unpredictable. The risk mitigation policies were not strong in Egypt, and this is why we recovered this by imposing this on all of our agendas. MOSS also provided cash transfer to support touristic guides, to support nurses, and maybe they are not that much poor, but they were affected with the cut-offs of their salaries for a long period of time. Also, the loan repayment of indebted women, it was facilitated by NGOs and the banking sector of delaying the installments of a period of 6 months in Nasser Social Bank, and it was also a decision taken by the central bank. As for the nurseries, we reopened the nurseries to enable working mothers to return back to work while considering all the precautions. But we also spent for the facilitators and the teachers working in the nurseries 126 facilitators and supervisors that whose salaries were cut off during this period of time. And finally, allowing the eligible insured person to pay 60% of the social insurance contributions. So we have taken multiple precautionary measures to secure the disbursement of monthly social insurance pension during COVID-19, especially with the elderly and the most vulnerable groups. I think there was a kind of support from South-South cooperation through the Egyptian Red Crescent and through our emergency central administration in the ministry of providing support to different or civil society organizations in different countries like Lebanon, Yemen, Indonesia, Somalia, Ethiopia. So I mean, there was support given to other organizations, especially through the Egyptian Red Crescent, Djibouti, Palestine, Sudan. So more or less the health interventions and the economic interventions went great. As for the policies, to close with, in terms of our interventions, we learned a lot. We became to be more sure and more on track in regards to the digital transformation. Egypt has done enormous efforts during this period to enhance the digital readiness, especially during that crisis. MOSS has established a database. Ministry of Social Solidarity established a database to record the interventions of all civil society organizations. So we became to have one unified database for all the interventions to ensure the non-duplication or the fair distribution of benefits. An online portal for inquiries and complaints were open. An online and also support system, psychological support system were given to women who are violated during this period or are the border of being violated, and for the people who are recovering from drugs and substance abuse to ensure their non-retention to recovery, to drugs abuse or to violence. I think we have our economic empowerment program that expanded its support to more cash transfer and to more SMEs with soft loans and many facilities that were given to especially the informal workers. We developed a strategy to protect the informal workers, especially during the times of crisis, and we're on the border of launching a fund, emergency fund, especially for that purpose. Also, MOSS had an insurance fund that has been proposed to protect these informal workers, with special emphasis to fishermen, contractual people, and so on. Also, we have our financial inclusion. We issued e-cards for beneficiaries for cash transfer program and for the SMEs beneficiaries in order to use smart cards, and it was an opportunity for us to actually promote this culture of e-payment and financial inclusion. I think also the international disaster relief, we supported different countries by providing in-kind and medical aid during crisis. Even MOSS supported the different universities to open up their university hostels in order to have distancing, and we added many of our social care institutions that were open for students. Finally, I think the issue of having a unified national support system was very important, of having inclusive social protection, especially in times of emergency. Having the partnership inside Egypt and outside Egypt was very important, shedding the light on additional social protection policies and gaining more grounds, because I know that in all countries, the social investment is not as strong as the physical investment. But now it's being more and more sold and more selling itself and marketed and advocated in all of the countries. So I especially, I enjoyed my short speech with you. Hope I was not too long, but again, I thank you all very much for this opportunity to share our experiences. And I'd like to thank the UN agencies, all of them. Special thanks to ESCWA that supports us a lot in terms of our analysis of multidimensional poverty, that supported us also in issuing the first poverty and social protection index and social protection poverty in the region, in the Arab region. So we are indebted to all of this support, and we really appreciate it. And we remain as Egypt for sharing any successful experience and benefiting from all the successes of the other countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. We would have liked maybe to hear more from you, because there are a lot of measures that Egypt has been taking actually, and very much interested also to learn maybe more from you how other countries can benefit from all these measures, addressing the vulnerable groups, particularly also what you refer to the informal sector emergency fund. That's of course of special importance. As you know, there are billions of people actually in the informal sector globally, and particularly in the global south. And the last word that you said about social investment is of really importance, here. And we will try to reach out to you to see how we can also have this experience shared with other countries from the global south. Thank you so much. And now we will move to a country in special situation, Palestine. And we are very pleased to have Mr. Dawood Al-Deeg, Deputy Minister, Ministry of Social Development in Palestine. And before that, actually, Mr. Dawood Al-Deeg has been very much involved in poverty reduction in Palestine. So he's not only representing a ministry, but he also had his own experience in this field. And we would like to hear from a country that has a special place in the heart of many people in the global south. The floor is yours.
شكرا. مساء الخير. شكرا
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Your Excellency Rola Dashti, and thanks to the brother Adil Abdul Latif. Allow me to thank the brothers and also thank the Office of the United Nations, the South-South Cooperation Office, for organizing this event. First of all, this dialogue, it's a South-South dialogue. Second of all, it talks about the social system protection. The third, and very important, we address to what we learned from the COVID-19 pandemic, and how do we continue the efforts of our communities and governments to reach the achievements of the agenda of the self-sustainability. Palestine has been affected by the pandemic just like anywhere in the world, but it came in a very difficult time. Political hardship and political and economic embargo, the delay of the century, and also continuation of the settlement, and also the hostile positions or stance by the previous U.S. administration, and these, along with the pandemic and these circumstances, affected the readiness of the government to interfere. First of all, I'd like to thank the local society in Palestine, and this is very important. Our partners, our international partners, whether UN institutions or international organizations, or the private sector, and Palestine, with their support, we've done at least the minimum standards. And I'd like to seize the opportunity that we conducted dialogues in the South states. I'd like for this dialogue to be constructive, honest, and responsible. I'm talking. The reason I'm saying this because we want to focus on the efforts we provided as governments. Despite the limited resources, governments would have been able to provide what's asked of her. We could have done better than that, but each government had its own limitations. First of all, we have to review altogether one more time what the pandemic has exposed when it comes to social development, because we're talking about the social sustainability. We have to remember the slogan, "Leave no one behind." This slogan, we have to remember that. I think the pandemic is a chance to remember who was left behind. The unstructured economy. And also the laborers who are not covered by this. Over one night, they spent all of their lost out of their all their livelihood. And we have to say with all the humility that pandemic exposed the limitations not only in social protection systems but also in economic systems. The social protection systems not only responsible of the ministries, but it's a community effort. There has to be effort and harmony between the political policies and economic policies to counter lack of housing and poverty and we have to recognize that the pandemic, not only in the southern states, but all over the world, exposed the huge gap of inequality, whether it's between the states or within one state. We have to remember altogether, and we still do, the ugly face of inequality when it comes to the inequality distributing vaccinations and medical stuff. The other thing is the pandemic with its health and economic ramifications. The pandemic will leave mental ramifications on others, and obviously this is not talked about a lot when it comes to stress among the family members. Also, it's an indicator of escalation and violence in the community. Plus, I'd like to jump ahead to the points that we have to learn from, which is the readiness. The pandemic is all about being ready and the readiness of us. And how do we organize our institutions to have a quicker response, a quick intervention, and the ability to have an efficient government to manage the crisis. And here we realized that the intervention systems that we have, this pandemic came as a golden opportunity for us to learn and a real opportunity for us to change. And whoever does not learn from the pandemic will never learn. One of the most learned lessons in the government of Palestine, or state of Palestine, as a government, we took 5 or 6 months to evaluate the economic and social impacts. As a social institute, we were asked to along with our partners in the community to evaluate the social impacts of the pandemic, like unemployment, poverty, and social togetherness, and also its impact on the people and children. But I'd like to share with you the most important recommendations and lessons that we came up with. First, improving the quickness of response to the shock responsibilities and social responsibility. We recognize that our intervention was slow, and this has to do with how do you transfer the social systems into systems that respond to a crisis. Second of all, the importance of investing in data, because whoever owns the data when it comes to micro data and the geographical area has the ability to design intervention and also the quickness and targeting. Whoever does not own or have the data will work randomly. And one more time, this is a recommendation for all of our states, meaning that investing in data, and also managing the social system database, because this will this will enhance the data intervention. Do you have a data or you don't have data? You have to invest in data when it comes to elderly people with disabilities, children, and also the poor people and the geographical areas. The second important thing, very, very important, as much as a synergy we have between the government and the community and the organizations and the humanitarian aids that is led by the international organizations. This also was a recommendation, a very important recommendation, because there has to be coordination and synergy and integration between what the humanitarian aid is doing that is led by the UN organizations. Yes, governments do participate, but it's led by the UN organizations. The only concern and the recommendation for all states is that the humanitarian aid has not to be doesn't have to lead to a parallel systems, because the international organizations, I'm sure we're not doubting its intents, but they have to be careful of not creating a parallel social systems, parallel to the government systems. They have to work together. They have to exchange the data and interventions and coordination. The other point, the last point in the recommendations, governments are not alone in this field. They have to be some organizational and institutional efforts, based on institutions, and also civil society organizations and private sector, to also citizen participation. This formula, this organizational formula, that gives it legitimacy and partnership, especially in the times of crisis. So everybody could feel that they are present and their voices are heard, especially not leaving anyone behind, and also hear voices for people who don't have voices. This is a very important for the governors and a recommendation. And I don't want to take too long from your time. The recommendations when it comes to South-South cooperation, we see that it's very important to promote the coordination, because I support that the dialogue. But we'll do with all the honesty. We have to be honest. We dialogue with the North more than we dialogue among ourselves. So this dialogue and these dialogues has to be an alarming bell, and we. And I have to focus that we don't lack the human resources or the tools. What we lack is the technology and the financial aspect that limits us from intervening from the ESCWA, from the Islamic Development Bank or the UN. First of all, honestly, we talk about definitions of poverty and fragileness and resilience. Let's be honest, and this conflict between this and the domination of the definitions by the North, which are followed by the measurement tools and targeting tools. And now is the time for us, as southern states, after these experiences, to identify these definitions according to our governments and how to measure poverty from our experience. With all the honesty, we support and we promote that we transform from the criticism to the multi-dimensional approach when it comes to social weakness and I'd like to thank ESCWA specifically because it provided us with the technological development, and this is the first approach of multi-dimensional approach to evaluate poverty, and the government rectified it, and now with the National Task Force of Countering Poverty, we looking forward to find implementations when it comes to the targeting tools, and also when we look at the indicators of poverty and so on. The other point, among ourselves, we can coordinate to mobilize resources when it comes to the state level or national or regional development, and we have to work together to utilize the resources. The other point, I recommend that we have to have a community of practitioners when it comes to protection, platform of practitioners, and I'm honored to be a member of the protection system reform with ESCWA. But we need a platform of workers and practitioners for them to exchange ideas and recommendations. And the last one is that southern states with our principles and values, we have always based our work on solidarity, develop solidarity. We have to review this value when it comes to coordination and work among our states. I think it has went backward a little bit when it comes to foreign financial resources. It needs the principles and the aid and the help that we were raised on. So I would like from this event and dialogue and forum, I wish you the best of luck, and I wish that our states to have the right of self-determination, and the states who suffer from the conflicts and occupations to get rid of this occupation. First of all, the occupation of Palestine, and to get Jerusalem as its capital. And also we have to pay attention to the social agenda, social justice, and the social togetherness, and the inequality. These things are eating our societies. And we hope from the northern states and its inherent institutions to take into consideration the national priorities to them, and to provide the necessary support they need. Thank you so much.
We can work together on mobilizing resources, and the importance of having a community of practitioners, and the importance of solidarity. And as you have said, this is at the heart of South-South cooperation, adding to it also what you have said, about the importance of national ownership and respecting sovereignty. These are, of course, the main principles of South-South cooperation. I would like really to thank you warmly for saying all this. I wouldn't have been able to say it much better than you. And also what you have, mentioned, re-emphasizing, what we all know about the importance of data and how it is crucial to reach vulnerable groups and identifying those who are left behind. So I'm also looking forward, to continue this discussion with you in order to see how we can benefit from all these good ideas, and how we can also work together on establishing some of the platform that you have been actually, that you have said in your intervention. Thank you so much. And now I will move to the third speaker. The third speaker will have a recorded message from His Excellency, Mr. Rodolfo Solano Quiros, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Worship in Costa Rica. And as all you know, Costa Rica has been one of the countries in the Global South taking the lead on many interesting, innovative interventions on social development, particularly the expenditure on health and education since maybe the late 40s. So we will hear the recorded message of His Excellency.
Excelencias, amigas y amigos, es motivo de alegría poder acompañarles en este conversatorio de la Oficina de las Naciones Unidas para la Cooperación Sur-Sur y la Comisión Económica y Social de las Naciones Unidas para Asia Occidental, acerca de la cooperación internacional para los sistemas de protección social en tiempos de COVID-19. Agradezco en nombre de Costa Rica y en calidad de presidencia del Comité Sur-Sur de la CEPAL, permitirnos un espacio para la reflexión sobre un tema que es medular para enfrentar la crisis sanitaria, social y económica que la pandemia ha traído. El COVID-19, en efecto, ha llevado al límite la estructura socioeconómica de todos nuestros países y ha puesto sobre la mesa, con dolorosa claridad, las debilidades de nuestro sistema. La crisis sanitaria ha reconfigurado la economía, dejando en evidencia las brechas estructurales de nuestros sistemas políticos, económicos y sociales, y ha exacerbado las desigualdades, no solo entre países, sino también dentro de estos. Es por esta razón que debemos resurgir a partir de nuevos paradigmas de desarrollo, más equitativos, más democráticos y más humanos, poniendo siempre a las personas en el primer lugar. Por eso es necesario también dinamizar el multilateralismo y la arquitectura de los organismos financieros, así como reforzar la cooperación y la solidaridad internacional, pues es solamente uniendo nuestros esfuerzos que podremos superar todos juntos los inconmensurables retos que enfrentamos. Debemos reconocer que las graves consecuencias que la pandemia impactan negativamente nuestros esfuerzos por alcanzar las metas de la Agenda 2030 y producen, sin lugar a duda, un retroceso en lo ya avanzado en muchos ámbitos. Es por ello de vital relevancia que las agendas nacionales, regionales y globales, con un espíritu renovado, se conviertan en un instrumento pragmático, eficiente y eficaz para dirigir nuestros esfuerzos por los próximos años. Costa Rica, en particular, ha logrado identificar diversos aspectos como determinantes para poder avanzar en el desarrollo social de manera más inclusiva. Entre ellos, se destaca la cobertura digital como un factor determinante para disminuir la desigualdad en general y, particularmente, en el tema de la educación. La inversión en el desarrollo científico y tecnológico en salud, la inversión pública en descarbonización, seguridad alimentaria, disminución de brechas territoriales, bioeconomía, economía naranja y la economía de los mares. A partir de todos estos ámbitos, debemos buscar crear fuentes de trabajo que no solamente dignifiquen a las personas, sino también que dinamicen la economía. Esta crisis trae consigo una oportunidad para poder revisar de cerca la gobernanza de la cooperación internacional en los espacios multilaterales. Es necesario promover un diálogo estructurado y formal para redefinirla en todos sus componentes, dirigirla a cada país para atender las necesidades propias, adaptando los instrumentos existentes con creatividad, para así acoplarlos a la nueva realidad y diseñar nuestras herramientas que nos permitan generar el máximo impacto con los recursos que tendremos a nuestra disposición. Es claro y evidente que los esfuerzos aislados son insuficientes. Es urgente buscar estrategias que agilicen el logro de los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible, considerando el valor agregado de la cooperación sur-sur y triangular como medios de implementación de la Agenda 2030 y como complemento de las diferentes formas tradicionales de cooperación internacional. Como países, tenemos el reto y la oportunidad de ser co-creadores de un futuro mejor para todos. y estamos llamados a creer que esto es posible mediante una cooperación reforzada con enfoque en la solidaridad. Queridas amigas, queridos amigos, Costa Rica, desde la presidencia del Comité de Cooperación Sur-Sur, trabaja con ahínco en la profundización del diálogo multilateral, con miras a construir una cooperación más efectiva para enfrentar los efectos de esta terrible pandemia en todas las esferas de la sociedad. Por muchos años, los países de la región de América Latina y el Caribe han experimentado una fuerte disminución del flujo y del acceso a los recursos de cooperación no reembolsable, principalmente por su ingrata categorización como países de renta media y de renta media alta por parte de las instituciones financieras internacionales. Esta forma de medición del desarrollo, basada en el PIB per cápita, no refleja la realidad, por lo que creemos firmemente en la necesidad de un cambio de paradigma.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, as you have heard from the Minister, His Excellency Minister Rodolfo Solano Quiros from Costa Rica, he actually referred to several important points about the addressing inequalities, and also most importantly, also what he said about the need for paradigm shift and how this is very important for South-South cooperation. And I just would like to note that Costa Rica is taking the lead now in working on a new platform, South-South cooperation, within the UN Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. And that would be very interesting to see how this platform will be important also for the Global South. For the sake of time now, I will turn to the fourth speaker, Mr. Mansour Mukhtar, Vice President, Country Program, Islamic Development Bank. And Mansour, everybody actually is talking now about finance in post-COVID. But before actually giving you the floor, I would like to recognize the important role of the Islamic Development Bank, not only on finance, but on poverty eradication, and also the leading role that the Islamic Development Bank has been taking on South-South cooperation. It's always a pleasure actually to have our friends from the Islamic Development Bank. I would like to give you the floor, Mansour, and we looking forward also to hear from you and continue our cooperation. Mansour, the floor is yours. You are muted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adel, and I would like to begin first by expressing gratitude to the organizers of this event for providing us with an opportunity, the Islamic Development Bank, to participate as a panelist. And I have honored and privileged to be representing the Islamic Development Bank's president, Dr. Bandar Hajar, and my ISDB colleagues. And I want to thank the panelists also who spoke before me for sharing their perspectives and experiences, and as well as the Her Excellency Rola Dashti, the UN Executive Secretary, UNOSSC, and His Excellency Mr. Abdul Latif, DG of UN Office for South-South Cooperation. Let me begin by pointing out that amidst the ongoing challenges presented by the COVID-19 pandemic, a close look at efforts to strengthen social protection systems to benefit the most marginalized groups and how South-South cooperation can play a role in making them more inclusive and sustainable is a timely choice for this session. We at the Islamic Development Bank have a long history of supporting the most disadvantaged and marginalized groups within our member countries, including children, women, youth, and refugees. And like similar institutions, the bank has undergone several transformations to improve its delivery of development assistance to its member countries. Through this process, These groups have increasingly gained a prominent focus in the bank's work, and I will illustrate by giving recent examples of what the bank has done. In 2019, the bank made a major achievement by approving 4 main policies in support of disadvantaged and marginalized groups, and as contribution to social protection and development in its member countries. These include women empowerment policy, a youth development strategy, civil society engagement policy, and fragility and resilience policy. We also launched several flagship initiatives and programs contributing to alleviate poverty and reduce vulnerability by improving access to economic opportunities and strengthening community resilience. And for example, in 2019, the bank established a new program called She Trades, which aims to enhance export capacity of women-owned enterprises and their compliance with the market requirements, while connecting women entrepreneurs with regional and local value chains in markets in the MENA region. And in support of women's health, the Islamic Development Bank, along with the Islamic Solidarity Fund for Development, formulated the Coalition to Stop Obstetric Fistula program to improve maternal health. The program benefits 5 member countries, namely Afghanistan, Pakistan, Sierra Leone, Somalia, and the Gambia. This year, the bank will launch a regional project for empowering West African women, small and medium enterprises in rice value chains, which supports women in Guinea, Niger, Senegal, and Sierra Leone to engage in entrepreneurial activities in the rice value chain and increase women's access to local and regional markets. Dear colleagues, I'd like to continue my remarks by sharing some of our experiences with respect to empowering youth across the region. In our attempt to support young people, we have undertaken numerous regional initiatives over the past years, focusing on skilling, creating jobs, and enhancing entrepreneurship, such as Youth Empowerment Support Program, the Vocational Literacy Program, the Microfinance Support Program, the SME Funds, and the Education for Employment Initiative. The bank also firmly believes that civil society organizations make up an important fabric of the social protection systems in our member countries. And to harness effective partnerships with the civil society organizations, the bank and the Islamic Solidarity Fund for Development initiated the NGO Empowerment for Poverty Reduction Program, which contributes in a comprehensive manner to lift people out of poverty and improve the socioeconomic well-being of the hard-to-reach communities through refugees' education, job creation, building resilience, and community livelihoods development. Colleagues, the Islamic Development Bank is cognizant of the fact that many of our member countries suffer from fragility due to ongoing conflicts. Recognizing the role that SMEs play in fragile settings, the bank provides needed assistance to SMEs in fragile situations. The flagship Business Resilience Assistance for Value-Added Enterprises, or BRAVE as an acronym, program provides matching grants and capacity building activities for women-owned SMEs in Yemen, Nigeria, and Burkina Faso. In addition, the bank has also been supporting the Syrian refugees through the Syrian Refugees and Internally Displaced Peoples Education Program to create pathways for youth by supporting their education and providing decent employment opportunities. I would like to end my interventions with final thoughts on the interplay between the experiences I shared with you and South-South cooperation. As you know, the Islamic Development Bank is the only multilateral development bank that is owned and operated fully by countries from the South. More specifically, the member countries of the Organization for Islamic Cooperation. For us, South-South cooperation as a solidarity-based cooperation model is therefore a core part of our DNA, as well as raison d'etre. In this respect, The bank has been supporting South-South cooperation since its very founding, targeting various dimensions of South-South cooperation, including technical cooperation, promoting South-South trade, and facilitating cross-border investments. Over the last few years, we have scaled up our engagement in South-South cooperation through the reverse linkage modality, connecting member countries all the way from Indonesia in the east to Suriname in the west. This support has been wide-ranging, spanning many sectors, including renewable energy, agriculture, health, and vocational training, to name a few. The bank stands ready to facilitate the connections among our member countries, as well as with countries of the South, to scale up cooperation in the area of enhancing social protection by facilitating the sharing of know-how, expertise, and resources through our South-South cooperation mechanisms, with the aim to alleviate the suffering of those who are most vulnerable, as well as catalyze opportunities to promote a better, more resilient, and sustainable future. I thank you for your time and do look forward to the rest of today's discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mansour, and I would like to thank you for all the good examples that you shared with us, and also bringing to the attention the reverse linkage modality of the Islamic Development Bank, which is an important modality for South-South cooperation, which we have been working also with you to make sure you know that countries of the Global South can benefit from it. And also I would like to emphasize again, ISDB was the first actually finance institution from the South, which is very important to remind because you have actually very rich experience, you know, during several decades, which many countries from the Global South can benefit from. Now I will move to our distinguished discussants from also will be connecting to Asia and Latin America and also the Arab region. And the first speaker actually as a discussant is Mr. Kaveh Zahidi, Deputy Executive Secretary, ESCWA. So I will not take a long time for introducing our distinguished discussant. They're very well known. But just to remind you, you have 5 minutes and looking forward to hear from you, Kaveh. I know that it's too late, huh? So I will say good evening for you, huh? Kaveh, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Adel, and thanks to you and of course to Executive Secretary Rola for inviting us to join you today. And dear Excellencies, distinguished speakers, dear colleagues, it's a pleasure to join you today and to be hearing about the social protection across the globe through the panelists you brought together. As we heard from the speakers today, COVID-19 has truly brought social protection into the spotlight. There is now, I would say, a growing recognition that building resilience to things like the pandemic must go hand in hand with comprehensive social protection. And we've heard from the panelists in their intervention the insights and examples of social protection, especially in the ESCWA member states. So allow me to share with you some of the takeaways and reflections based on our work on social protection in Asia Pacific that I think basically serve to reinforce much of what we have already heard today. I think the first is that the repercussions of COVID-19 will continue to be felt for years to come, especially among people who are most vulnerable yet least protected. As an example, in Asia and the Pacific, 54% of the population are living without any form of social protection. In other words, 1 out of 2 people will have nothing to fall back on in times of sickness, in times of unemployment, or in times of a crisis like COVID-19. And depending on how the economy recovers, we estimate that somewhere between 90 and 200 million people in our region could move into poverty as a result of the pandemic, further reinforcing this critical need for social protection. To a large extent, the social protection deficit is the result of significant underinvestment in social protection, something we've heard from the other speakers and something which is the second point I wanted to share with you. In the case of Asia Pacific, only 4.9% of GDP is spent on social protection, and that's less than half of the global average of 11%. Our simulations at ESCWA show that providing basic universal benefit package to children, to persons with disabilities, and to older persons, which is an investment that would not exceed 6% of GDP of any country in our region, that investment could decrease the proportion of households living in poverty by up to 18%. So clearly a worthwhile investment with ripple effects on society, and ones that are so critical for the economic recovery as well. The third takeaway is that there is now a growing momentum to make universal social protection a reality. And I was so heartened to hear this from almost every single speaker that has gone before me today. Governments have been quick to mitigate the impacts of the crisis through a range of social protection measures, from wage subsidies to direct cash transfers for vulnerable populations, and so on. These short-term measures do generate the momentum for filling social protection gaps in the longer term as well. They also clearly show that governments are able to step up their efforts to strengthen social protection. Linked with this scaling up of social protection that we've seen in so many countries is an upsurge in innovation to improve actually the efficiency and the effectiveness of that social protection. An area, I believe, where the power of South-South cooperation in knowledge exchange and capacity building will be so crucial. Our analysis at ESCWA shows the growing adoption of new technologies in social protection, from integrated beneficiary databases in countries like Georgia and Indonesia to electronic social protection payments in other countries such as Fiji. And as new practices bring about seeds of change, cooperation will be needed to scale up and share these new solutions and to build the capacity needed to bring these technologies into full use. Which brings me to my final point. From scaling up investments in social protection to using innovation, multilateral cooperation, especially South-South cooperation, can help to accelerate the scaling up of social protection that is so badly needed as people continue to struggle to deal with the effects of the pandemic and as economies struggle to recover in its aftermath. In Asia and the Pacific, we are seeing this change just beginning to take root. The ESCWA member states, for example, endorsed in April the action plan to strengthen regional cooperation on social protection in Asia and the Pacific. And this action plan was the result of the collaboration between ESCWA, ILO, and multiple nominated focal points of member states from around 15 of our countries. Adopted in the midst of the pandemic, the action plan gives a very clear framework of 12 national measures and 3 regional actions to be implemented by 2030, a clear example of demand-driven and results-oriented cooperation. The implementation of this action plan will help our region of Asia Pacific move towards universal social protection. At ESCWA, we're working with our member states and with the UN Development System to translate this shared commitment into action. And where better to start than with the Office of South-South Cooperation, and of course, with bringing in learning from and sharing with our sister regional commissions. Dear Dr. Adil, you gave me 5 minutes. I believe it's almost there. So let me stop. But before handing back, let me again express my deep, deep gratitude to ESCWA, especially Executive Secretary Rola, and of course to the Office for South-South Cooperation, Dr. Adil, to you for inviting ESCWA to join you today to learn and to share a bit of our experience as well. Back to you, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Kaveh. I really appreciate all the very important points that you raised and bringing to our attention the action plan in Asia and the Pacific and reminding us about the universality of social protection. It is a human rights. As all you know, as you mentioned also, the refer to ILO, there is a recommendation on national social protection floors. So we have to keep this in mind as we move forward. I will not take a lot of time. Actually, your points actually very important, Kabir, but I would like to move to our next discussant, Mario Cimoli, Deputy Executive Secretary of ECLAC, because I know that you have to few minutes to stay with us. Mario, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Rola Dati, Secretary of ESCWA, it's nice to be with you Abdel, Abed Al-Latif. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you. South-South cooperation is important. I want to be very, very brief and very clear. I don't want to say the shopping list of many things that Latin America is doing. There is cash transfer. There is a measure that have to do with transferences. There is a basic income of emergency. Everything of this measure, ECLAC supported that the same way that ESCAP and ESCWA did it. That is right. I want to put only two or three points that have to do with the lesson that we have for this crisis, for the pandemic situation, for the South-South cooperation. First of all, we think that South-South cooperation has to have one voice to put on the global scenario, to put clearly that this situation is creating a more and more asymmetries between the developed world and the south of the economy in terms of productivity, production structure, and many of these changes is going to be transformed. Think about only that Europe have to have 7,500 billion euros of investment to transform the structure. You can understand how it's going to be this asymmetry. South-South needs one voice to think about. This is related also to the sanitary health system. We need to put clearly that the situation of Latin America and many other middle-income countries have to be supported with enormous cooperation to create a basis for health and sanitary system. Because in our region, we have a sanitary system that's very fragmented, very exclusive and not inclusive, where informal people don't have the possibility to use that. We need to create an enormous dialogue in this thing. And to do that, we need more cooperation and more support. And to understand, for example, that intellectual property right is an important issue to solve this question. One voice also has to be rethinking about trade. Trade has to be support the development and growth of our South-South economy. One voice for the whole South region. South-South cooperation is going to be very important. If we don't do that, it's very difficult to find that this asymmetry is going to be solved by itself. That is impossible. This asymmetry is going to be increasing and increasing and increasing. We can have an enormous cooperation among South-South countries, but this cooperation has to be supported by resources, technology, transfer, and so on. And we have one voice and one way to think about that. At the end of this, our analysis of supporting good partnership, a good exchange of experience in social policy is crucial one. But at the same time, we need to rethink about investment to support the social policy. That is an important thing to have to put clearly. Concluding, what is the lesson of this experience? We need one voice in different issues: depth, technology, health system, accessibility to trade for our countries. Okay? If we don't have one voice, this asymmetry is going to be impacting, increasing, and we are going to transform the global economy in the North-South model more and more and more difficult to support the consequences socially on this system. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mario, and thank you also for reminding you about the importance of having one voice from the South. It is really crucial, as you said, at this time, and we would like to work with regional commissions, our strategic partners, as we also will be working on the new system-wide strategy on South-South and triangular cooperation, and it provides, a very good framework to work together on addressing all these challenges that you and Kaveh actually, challenges and opportunities, in fact. And of course, we have heard before from the Executive Secretary of ESCWA. Now I would like to move to think tanks and civil society. We are honored to have with us Ms. Gala Diaz Lango, Executive Director Center for the Center for the Implementation of Public Policies Promoting Equity and Growth from Buenos Aires. Gala, you have the floor, and we would like actually to hear from you your reflection from the South-South cooperation angle on some of the insights from previous speakers, and also your experience, and if you could do that in 5 minutes.
Certainly. Many thanks for the invitation. It is an honor for me to be here. Well, I've heard so many things today. It is difficult to make a synthesis and react in 5 minutes, but I will try to do so. We've heard that we are currently going through a severe crisis, and this crisis is hitting hard in Latin America. Almost 34 million people got COVID-19 and more than 1 million died because of it. The first step to get out of this situation is the vaccines, which are slowly being accessed and distributed. It has been mentioned that the crisis is not only sanitary, it is also social and economic. And social protection has a great value to face and mitigate the effects of these crises, but also to create an overall more leveled playing ground. Latin America had 3 main principles in social protection before the pandemic, which is a growing rights-based approach, which led to a more universalistic perspective in the access to social protection, and also a more comprehensive approach, not segmenting income transfers with other types of programs. Since 2000, mostly, most of Latin American countries have expanded their social protection coverage, mainly through non-contributory measures. They have shifted from a more targeted emergency programs to a more universal rights-based approach program. This starting point enabled a quick and a wide response to the COVID-19 crisis, especially in terms of ensuring income to those who have had their jobs interrupted during the quarantine. There are still several challenges ahead. Firstly, in terms of social cohesion. The social protection coverage is wide, but it's not homogeneous. There are many asymmetries between contributive and non-contributive measures. And this is part of a, I think, more wide social pact that we need to revisit and focusing on intersectionalities and compounding inequalities. The second one is a gender pact. Gender approaches have been mainstreamed in social protection in most of Latin American countries, but there are still many relevant gender inequalities that affect the quality of lives that people can aspire to. And the third one is an intergenerational pact. In Latin America, we focus the worst conditions on children and adolescents. So therefore, we need to rethink how we distribute well-being between the different age groups. We still have many challenges ahead also in terms of institutionality, in terms of the information we have on social protection, on how we use it in terms of monitoring and evaluating policies. We have a great challenge regarding our fiscal pacts and how can we make those more progressive, and also in the coordination between different sectors and levels of government. I think there are 2 main lessons learned from Latin America that might be of use for the Arab region in particular, but also for other southern regions. The first one is a focus on compounding inequalities. For instance, we need to work on simultaneously inequalities and how to work on main determinants that can help us close these existing gaps, for instance, in terms of the provision of care or the cultural change. The second lesson is when designing social protection interventions, it is crucial to analyze the pre-existing inequity in the access to social protection systems if an improvement in terms of social cohesion is sought. I'm the executive director of CPEC. CPEC is one of the main think tanks in Latin America, and we have a very active role in several South-South cooperation networks. We believe that South-South cooperation is crucial to accelerate the shift from a tilted global power balance, which has been very clearly illustrated, for instance, by the access to the COVID-19 vaccines, with knowledge asymmetry, which has been mentioned, and the participation deficit also in terms of Southern voices, towards a more equitable and fair engagement on global issues. So many thanks for inviting us to be part of this very relevant event.
Thank you very much, Gala. And just to remind again that CPEC is a member of the South-South Global Thinkers. We are always actually honored to work with the think tanks from the Global South, and for reminding us, very briefly on the issues of rights-based approach and social cohesion, and how we have to address this global power balance. I would like then to move to our next speaker, Ms. Mariana Barboni, Senior Project Officer, International Policy Center for Inclusive Growth in Brazil. As your institution actually leads effort in this critical area of social protection, would like to hear from you and share your ideas about social protection and how South-South cooperation is a good platform for helping countries in the South to address the challenges of COVID-19. Mariana, the floor is yours, and 5 minutes as the previous speakers.
Thank you. I'll try. Distinguished colleagues, good morning. It's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. As the ESCWA Executive Secretary, Mrs. Rola Dashid, pointed in her opening remark, the COVID-19 crisis certainly exposed the gaps in terms of the social protection systems worldwide, especially to reach informal workers and sustainably finance the responses. But it also represents a great opportunity to learn from each other, considering the richness of the social protection responses worldwide. And so South cooperation is essential in promoting successful experiences and lessons learned, not only within MENA, but also with countries from other regions like Latin America that face similar challenges in building more inclusive and sustainable social protection systems in the post-COVID-19. The IPCIG, a partnership between the UNDP and the government of Brazil, supports South-South learning on inclusive social protection systems through the exchange of experiences, knowledge, and technical capacities. I would like to share with you today some examples of the IPCIG work on facilitating knowledge sharing and production in the MENA region. The IPCIG has recently started a project with UNICEF whereby policymakers from the Maghreb region come together with experts from Latin America to exchange experiences on innovative social protection practices. Earlier this year, the IPCIG published the study Improving Social Protection for Migrants, Refugees, and Asylum Seekers in Egypt, which included a review of international best practices. We were honored by the presence of Her Excellency Ms. Nivain El-Kabagi in the webinar that launched the study. The webinar took place in the socialprotection.org platform, a member-based project hosted by the IPCIG that disseminates evidence-based information and promotes online courses and global virtual discussions to a consolidated network of social protection policymakers, practitioners, and development experts. With the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, socialprotection.org, together with the IPCIG, GIZ, and DFAT, quickly put in place a global task force organizing 32 webinars attended by over 6,000 people. The task force ended with the global e-conference, turning the COVID-19 crisis into an opportunity. What's next for social protection? With more than 70 sessions designed in collaboration with 50 organizations and attended by 2,000 participants from all around the world. Arab countries such as Jordan and Morocco shared their experiences during the event. Together with the issue-based coalition on social protection, which includes several UN agencies such as ESCWA, UNDP, UNICEF, and ILO, the IPCIG produced a paper examining the first phase of social protection responses to COVID-19 in the MENA Arab States region. This paper was also one of the sources for the COVID-19 dashboard, a collaboration between UNDP Brazil, the IPCIG, GIZ, and SPACE. The dashboard provides a detailed overview of social protection responses in the Global South. Over 160 responses were mapped in MENA, including the increased coverage and benefit value of the Takaful and Karama cash transfer program in Egypt, and the use of social registries complemented by on-demand registration through digital platforms to reach informal workers in Morocco, Jordan, and Tunisia. Similar digital platforms were implemented in Costa Rica with Bono Proteger and in Brazil with Auxílio Emergencial. One distinction of MENA is the use of Zakat, which financed some of the responses, including in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Libya, and Egypt. This provides an interesting learning opportunity for countries in the region, as well as other Muslim majority nations. These are just a few examples of innovations that can contribute to SDG Target 1.3 beyond the pandemic, and which can be disseminated and improved through South-South learning. The COVID-19 crisis has shown that shock-responsive social protection systems, as well as financing and expanding social protection for informal workers, are pressing challenges in MENA, Latin America, and other regions. One-on-one technical sessions with policymakers and experts from different countries, which we at the IPCIG support and facilitate, can enhance learning on these issues. Despite our many differences, we have more in common than we often think. So let us build on our common ground and learn from each other to make inclusive and sustainable social protection systems a reality, and do not leave anyone behind. Thank you very much. I will share in the chat the link of some of the studies I have mentioned. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mariana. It's really very important ideas that you raised, and the examples shows, how much we can have this cross, regions exchange between Latin America and the Caribbean, Africa, and Asia and the Pacific. And we are very pleased actually to hear from you, and looking forward also to have this information that you shared. I would like now to have the fifth discussant, I cannot say the last, but not least, my dear brother, friend, and colleague, Ziad Abdel Samad, Executive Director for the Arab NGO Network for Development. I will not say 5 minutes, but try, Ziad. I know that you have many things to say, particularly in a country that has all maybe the challenges that the world is facing. They are maybe encapsulated in one country, small country is Lebanon. The floor is yours, Ziad.
Thank you, dear Adel, and thank you for our colleagues in ESCWA for inviting and giving me this opportunity to participate in this important panel and side event. Actually, I will focus on the regional level. I will not be opportunistic to talk about my country. But I want to highlight mainly the importance when we are talking about the South-South cooperation. I wanted to highlight the role of civil society in the South-South cooperation as well. I mean, South-South cooperation should not be limited to the cooperation among the governments and the international institutions. And here, allow me to say that civil society in MENA region, despite all the challenges that we are facing, we managed to create kind of a platform on sustainable development in order to be able to enhance or to launch kind of a parallel process to the efforts launched by ESCWA and the League of Arab States. And this platform is kind of an alliance of 7 regional networks representing different sectors, talking about networks working on development, networks working on people with disability, climate and housing, gender, equality, labor unions, transparency and governance and civic engagement, mainly elections and others. So this platform yearly, they organize a yearly Arab Forum on Sustainable Development in parallel or as a side event to the official one, and we try to focus on three main objectives. First, to have discussions and dialogue among civil society to addressing the main challenges that we are facing in the region, and there are many. And many of them were highlighted in the previous presentations. We also try to enhance dialogue with our governments through ESCWA and the League of Arab States, but also we try to address the international community, basically those institutions and organizations that they have influence on our policy making and decision making. And allow me to highlight, three main challenges that we unveiled during our last Arab Forum. But also let me tell you that we had our side events in the high-level political forum last week on Wednesday, where we presented the outcomes of this regional joint effort. The first issue that we really focus on is, governance. We can't talk about development and sustainable development and facing all the challenges that we are witnessing in terms of inequality, unemployment, poverty, and basically what the pandemic has unveiled in terms of structural challenges that we are facing without having real democratic, transparent and accountable governance. And this is something that in the region needs really to be seriously and in depth addressed. Basically, I believe that some of the political unrest that we are now witnessing is related in a way or another to the weak or lack of democratic governance in the region. The second point that we highly highlighted, that is there is a real need to rethink the whole model that we are implementing decades ago. Mainly we mean about the macroeconomic and the economic approach choices, mainly when we are talking about the productivity, redistribution, all this dimension, but also the social policies, focusing mainly on this universal rights-based social protection systems that instead of focusing on the targeted programs or safety nets or target-oriented, let's say, programs. This is my 5 minutes. I need 2 more minutes if you allow, Adil, because the third main challenge is we really focus on this. What do we mean by the multidimensional partnership as a prerequisite for the implementation of the Agenda 2030? And here, when we are talking about the partnership with the private sector, we also need to see tools and mechanisms how to hold the private sector accountable in order for the private sector to be positive, to have a positive impact for development and not, to have a negative impact on social and environmental dimensions. But also, when we are talking about the multidimensional partnership, we also need to see an effective and constructive engagement of civil society. Talking about the space for civil society, the channels for consultation and civil society engagement in policy making, in the implementation, but also in the evaluation and assessment of the implementation of these policies. So these are the main issues. We have many other examples and success stories when it comes to the South-South cooperation at the level of civil society. I can say 3 of them very quickly. let's say, the preparation of the Arab Watch report, which is a regional report, a bi-yearly regional report, focusing mainly, or let's say, a kind of an observatory to focus on the policy making in the region, highlighting main themes. So, for example, by the end of this month, in July, we will be launching the 5th regional report, Arab Watch report, focusing mainly on the private sector and the private sector accountability. What are the tools? What are the parameters? What are the main, let's say, means in order to be able to monitor the private sector performance and accountability? And this is an effort of more than 25 experts from 12 Arab countries and some, let's say, regional papers. The second experience, and this, let's say, report serves as a main tool for advocacy. I mean, to negotiate with the governments, to negotiate with the international institutions, but also to negotiate with the public policy makers. The second example that I can give, and my previous colleague talked about the academia and the role of the academia in all this issue, we try to bridge the relation between civil society and academia by closely working with the Issam Faris Institute and the American University of Beirut at the regional level, trying to work on many, let's say, regional programs in order to see how we can bring together the efforts of academia and civil society together in order to enhance, to empower, and to make, let's say, make the role of civil society more successful. And thirdly, civil society also has access to the international arena. I mean, the Arab NGO Network for Development is, for example, a part of the Global Reflection Group, Civil Society Reflection Group on Sustainable Development, which is producing a yearly report, a spotlight report, addressing the systemic challenges at the global level. So, I mean, also the South-South cooperation is not only limited to the role of the governments, but the role of civil society. When we are talking about the South-South cooperation, is very useful, constructive, and can bring a lot of successes and input and additional resources to the efforts. Thank you, and I'm sorry for taking long.
Thank you very much, Ziad. It's really the point that you raised is very important, you know, about the role of the civil society. I just would like to remind that in 2019, the international community reached an agreement on the Buenos Aires outcome document of the second high-level United Nations Conference on South-South cooperation. In that document, actually, it refers to the role of think tanks, communities of practice networks, and expert groups. So it has already recognized that, and we are looking forward to work with all these networks, because as I mentioned earlier, at the heart of South-South cooperation is sharing experiences, not only from governments, but from think tanks, and of course, the expert groups that you are representing. So this is something that we are actually would like to emphasize. We actually are very much behind, you know, you have 18 minutes after, you know, we were supposed to finish maybe 20 minutes ago. I will not actually take a lot of your time. I just would like to remind again that this was an important event, you know, bringing together the regional dimension with the lead of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission in Western Asia. And we are very actually thankful to Her Excellency, Dr. Rola Dashti, for taking the lead on this, representing the regional commissions. And the second point that I would like, you know, to emphasize before I close is that social protection is again on the top of the agenda of the international community. And we have actually to continue seizing this opportunity. Of course, the pandemic is a huge challenge for humanity, but from this, at least the opportunity here is coming back, you know, emphasizing that social protection is a human rights. It was in the Universal Declaration for Human Rights. It was in the International Economic, Social, and Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. And also, it is embedded, you know, in the in Agenda 2030, and it is the heart of how we address leaving no one behind. So from the human rights-based approach, it is there, but how we can, the Global South can work together in doing that. We are very pleased actually to team with regional commissions in addressing this, and we are looking forward to work with them in creating this platform on social protection in the Global South, and we'll be very delighted actually to work with the regional commissions and also team with the think tanks and the civil society. We will prepare, of course, a report of this meeting. We'll share it with you. I will not be able actually to summarize the wealth of this discussion, but at the end, I would like to thank all the distinguished speakers and discussants, and thank our colleagues at the Regional Commission in ESCWA and ISCAP and ICLAC, and wishing you all the best. And we will continue our cooperation, seizing this important opportunity to push for an important agenda for leaving no one behind. Thank you all, and wish you all the best, and continue, of course, our follow-up for the HLPF. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, and have a good day, good evening, and good night in some parts of the world.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Adel.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.